In our leading story this evening, the Muslim Judicial Council has expressed shock at the attack on worshippers at a mosque in Cape Town. A man walked into the mosque in Malmesbury in the early hours of this morning and stabbed an imam who is a prayer leader in a mosque. A struggle ensued after other worshippers dashed to help. One of them was also fatally wounded in the brawl. Several people, including a police officer, sustained injuries. The officer then shot and killed the attacker. The cause of the attack remains unknown. The Hawks are investigating the matter. The South African Muslims may celebrate the end of Ramadan tomorrow if a reliable moon sighting takes place.
An utter disbelief that something has happened, of this nature. Normally in South Africa, we are extremely peace-loving community. We are multi-religious, multicultural. We get along with everyone, basically. And for this to have happened within the final hours almost of the month of Ramadan, which is a month of God consciousness, of spirituality, of your personal development, is a complete shock to the MJC, to its members, to the community in general. And we are highly disturbed that this has taken place. And we ask our community to please, and we ask for South Africans to please pray for the families that are affected by this horrible and horrendous crime.
Well, joining us now on the phone line is Ibrahim Dean, who is a researcher at Afro Middle East. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, what was your reaction to hearing this news on the possible eve of the end of Ramadan?
Thanks for having me. I think it was utter surprise, especially because, from initial, the initial report, it doesn't seem as if it was anything sectarian in nature. And also because, ever since, there's always been disagreements and differences within Muslim communities within South Africa. But it's never ever gone violent. So it is very surprising, very shocking, and I think it's also a very sad moment because, we have seen innocent loss of life.
You have mentioned that there's been some recent conflicts between some Muslim communities. Do you think that it might have been Muslim-on-Muslim violence? Could it have been another religion against the Muslims, something of more political nature, perhaps?
I think firstly one is, we need to hear more for more info to come out. But it doesn't seem to be anything that would be sectarian. The mosque wasn't, it was a Sunni mosque, which is the more dominant, sect within South Africa. Mm-hmm. And also, so it doesn't seem to be sectarian. It could be, many have said the person who committed the crime didn't seem right. So it could be something to do with an individual thing, a mental thing, but it doesn't seem to be something that is politicized or sectarianized. And also it doesn't seem to be, at the moment, there's been no claim from ISIS or anything along those lines. So it's not also, in a sense, on that level. So it just seems to be, it's something that has caught everyone by surprise, and we just need to wait more to get more information on the perpetrator, who from initial reports isn't a South African national. So we need to get more information on that, so we can start then looking as to, is it something to do with, intra-tensions between, different sectors within the Muslim society. But it's at the moment, it just seems to be something that's a very isolated incident, not in any way related to what happened a month ago in Berlin.
Well, Mr. Dean, do stay with us on the phone line. We are also joined by Mr. Riyad Fattah, the second Deputy President of the Muslim Judicial Commission, and also joining us on the phone line is Jasmine Opperman, security expert. Good evening to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me just start with you, Jasmine. What were your thoughts on this recent attack?
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers. First of all, sincere condolences to those ones who have lost lives, family members in this tragic incident. I think the initial response is horror, is shock, is surprise. It is not something that we are familiar with in South Africa, but I think that what also got to me is the way the whole situation has been portrayed in the international media. There is certain essential information elements lacking to come to a conclusive analysis on this matter. And already you can see in the international media the whole issue of sectarian divide happening in South Africa. And that is not factually based. So it's all speculation. It is all informed by opinion of what is happening in the Middle East, and now it's spilling over to South Africa, which remains unverified. I've been on the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda Telegram channels for the last few hours. There is simply no mention of this attack. And if there were any links, especially from the Islamic State, I promise you, the fanboys would have already said something about the attack. So I think we must be very careful. And I love the way the religious institutions have responded. It's a positive message of religious unity, no matter what faith or religion, but standing together and fighting this, whatever caused it, because it's an attack in a holy place. And that is horrific in itself.
And just to you, Mr. Fatah, good evening to you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Just talk to us. I know that you had issued a statement, but just on the record, your thoughts as well. And have you received any messages of support from other religious fraternities?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. From the Malmesbury Judicial Council, we obviously condemn the attack. We are shocked. Just like the previous person that has said, religious institutions must be protected, and in South Africa we are by far and large a religious community, and we really want to say thanks to the interfaith community. We have received letters of condolences from the pastors that we work with in the interfaith community, from government officials and so on, but it is still a horror that is facing us. I want to echo the words of the person that spoke before me, and that is that South Africa is a very peaceful and loving community. The Muslim community has always shown that over the years, and there is definitely, we are not going to go onto the sectarian line. It is important that we look at what the police reports say, and everybody not to jump to conclusions and that we create chaos in our beautiful country.
Now, Mr. Dean, having mentioned for the other two callers, just talking about how we are living in a peaceful country, do you think that there is a possibility of an escalation of these kinds of incidents?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that, as Desmond said very well, there is differences. I think if you think there's no differences in the Muslim community, then we are kidding ourselves. But it's always been at a rhetorical level, and at that level, it's never been violent. And I think even if you see the response to what happened in Varna, or even the most conservative, Sunni institution said, we may not agree with their beliefs, but we will, please, whatever you don't use violence. And so I think that means that at an institutional level, these different bodies have actually worked very well in trying to condemn violence as a means of settling differences or sorting out differences. However, we do need to know that there is sometimes lone wolf figures, youngsters that are sometimes inspired, by things they read on Google. That we can't stop, but that's not necessarily institutionalized. That hasn't really happened at all in this country before, and I think, we shouldn't over exaggerate what happens. I mean, this just seems to be a very isolated incident. Very, no sectarian, doesn't seem to be sectarian, no ISIS claim, and people in the masjid said that the man seemed as if he was, a bit mentally unstable, and so it could just be, a person who was mentally unstable, carrying out this horrific act, and then the overreaction can actually then fuel, the fire more. So I think the response and reaction means that any instances specifically in South African Muslim community, as me and Justin have seen very much how they dealt with the issue of the Islamic State, it seems to be a harmonious tolerance or call for non-violence, and so that will curb any instance from becoming more violent and from becoming a pattern.
And Jasmine, what danger do these kinds of attacks actually pose towards a social cohesion?
The greatest risk we are facing twofold, I would argue at this point. One is how we are going to respond to this matter as South Africans, that it's not based on fear and ill-informed facts, and we stay calm and collective and deal with these incidents as individual incidents, not jumping to conclusions that there's any relationship or correlation between Verulam and what has happened now, and we allow the state institutions to deal with this matter efficiently and effectively. But secondly also, and I think this is where we have to raise some questions, our police, our hawks, our intelligence service has to come to the table, has to show that they're on top of this, that they're doing their investigation, keeping the public informed. Because, I mean, if one looks at the Verulam attack, we have not seen any suspects being apprehended, and that just creates more and more tensions and more fear. And the more fear there is and the more tensions there are, I'm afraid extremist groups, extremist individuals are looking for these gaps. Let us not give them that opportunity at all costs. Not now. Not now.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Fattah, do you think that security now should be increased at places of worship, not only in mosques, but at other places where worshippers gather?
I think that is something that has now gripped all of us. Religious institutions across South Africa would probably take more care and take note of what is happening. And the mere fact that something like this, and one must really admire the Malmesbury community. They have reacted calmly, sensibly, and looking at what is on the ground and waiting for the police to come up with the report. And I want to echo that. We need the hawks and the security apparatus of South Africa to please come out now and tell us what has happened at Verulam. This is creating an amazing anxiety within the community, and the conspiracy theory is just not ending. So the same as with Malmesbury, we hope that our security people would come out and bring out a clear report of what has happened so that everybody can have the facts on the table. But as far as security is concerned, yes, I think that probably everybody is very much concerned now as to the security to all holy places.
Well, my final question to all of you is where to from here? Mr. Dean, can I hear your response first?
I think we just look at the response, and I think we need to not overreact and over-exaggerate. And the issue is not about over-policing, it's actually about more information. And that is the problem, because we don't want to create a situation where you're so fearful that you end up, it actually plays up into the extremists or the militant hands. So this seems to be an isolated incident, and we just need more information, more transparency within the police. And, it's just saying that Sheikh Riyad Fattah's response basically calling for something or more information on the Verulam killing, which is not necessarily, is something that I think is very, very, very progressive, because it's, the MJC, or at least it's a different denomination, or a sectarian aspect within the Islamic religion, and the MJC calling for this actually shows how progressive and how accommodating South African Muslim institutions and religious institutions are and have become and are becoming.
Jasmine, your final comments?
I think, yes, I think we should look at these attacks for what they are, but I think there's also another side to the coin, that irrespective of these attacks, and let's just put them on the side, no correlation. It is also, and South Africa should also realize, as a regional player, if one looks what is happening in Mozambique, for instance, is that we as a region need to be realistic about our vulnerabilities. We need to devise a short and medium-term tactical and strategic policy strategies and put us in the position to deal with these type of incidents effectively, no matter what we call it, if it's linked to extremism or not. But this brutality cannot be allowed in our society, cannot be allowed in Mozambique, and as a region we need to position ourselves far better to be able to counter such brutality.
Indeed, it is completely unacceptable. And lastly, can we hear from you, Mr. Fattah?
Yes, from the Muslim Judicial Council side, the Muslim Judicial Council has been calling for tolerance. Messages have gone out to the various clergy of the mosque that tomorrow would aid the end of the fasting month of Ramadan, call the community to calm, and that we work together and see what is it that we can create more harmony in our country. The interfaith bodies that the Muslim Judicial Council works with, that we work closely together to make sure that we are not going to allow extremism to take a foothold. I perfectly agree with the other gentleman in saying what is happening in the Middle East is not what is happening here. These are separate incidences, and we will wait on the police for their report.
Well, indeed, let tolerance and the law prevail. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. That was Shahriar Fatah, the second Deputy President of the Muslim Judicial Council, as well as Jasmine Opperman, security expert, and Mr. Ibrahim Dean, researcher at Afro Middle East Center. Moving on to other stories this evening, electricity provider Eskom has issued a Stage 1 power alert advising of possible constraints. In a statement on its website, Eskom advises that the generation and distribution of electricity across Eskom's network is constrained due to the acts of sabotage and intimidation that characterize the current industrial action by members of the trade unions. It further alleged that there have been several incidents of road blockades, attacks on staff and willful damage of electricity infrastructure. Eskom said coal deliveries by rail delivery and conveyor belts still continue to operate, albeit at limited capacity. The power stations that are worst affected by the industrial action are Hendrina, Camden, Kendal and Arnott. It has now advised commercial customers such as shopping centres and retail outlets to switch their air conditioning to 23 degrees Celsius.
Our technicians and other people who work at power stations are unable to go into power stations, and also the trucks that deliver coal into our facilities have also been stopped. In fact, in one instance, one of the trucks was hijacked, and then the protesters dumped the coal at the main entrance of the station, clearly sort of impeding any movement of trucks or any other vehicles going into the power station. So clearly things are not looking good, which is why we now have Stage 1 of load shedding. We have done everything possible to make sure that we prepare ourselves to meet the demand of winter. But unfortunately, we have a situation where some of these outages that are happening now are man-made, where people are willfully going into our substations and other electrical installations and trip those things down. So if you have people who do that, then clearly it affects our ability to continue to generate electricity.
In a landmark decision, the Constitutional Court has given Parliament 2 years to remedy a constitutional defect that affects victims of sexual abuse. The change in law would benefit victims of child molestation in particular. Previously, only rape and trafficking victims were allowed to lay charges after the so-called 20-year limitation. The court delivered the ruling while hearing victims of molestation allegedly by the late Johannesburg billionaire stockbroker Sidney Frankel. He allegedly committed his crimes between the 1970s and 1980s. The Gauteng Directorate of Public Prosecutions turned them down when they sought to lay criminal charges against Frankel in 2015. Known as the Frankel 8, the victims then approached the Constitutional Court to declare the section unconstitutional. Frankel maintained his innocence until his death in 2017.
It's important that we as a society, we understand why people would not speak out publicly or even demand justice. It's not because they're silent, but it's partly because they're speaking somewhere else where, they feel safe. And by the time they go to the court, it's because it took a process to get to that point. So it is proper that they are defended and protected within the context of the law. So sometimes it takes longer, in the same way that when we talk in communities and families, we say, why do women stay in relationships that are violent? We all come from spaces of fear, and also we take different times to get to a point where we have courage. Some of us don't even reach the point of getting out of that marriage or that relationship alive. So violence against women is complex. So it's important that at the least the law provides us the space to be able to eventually get to a point of readiness and get justice.